2 nights. That is what this comes down to. 2 specific nights this week in a stretch of farm country in southern Brazil, where the temperature on coffee tree branches will either stay just above zero or drop just below it. And depending on which side of that line the thermometer falls on, your morning cup of coffee could cost significantly more in 6 months. But here is what makes this moment genuinely important beyond the headlines. The market got this completely wrong. The people who are supposed to be watching this most carefully pulled $2.5 billion out of coffee positions, betting on a record harvest right before polar air mass started moving toward the world's most important coffee growing region. And the physics of what is setting up in Brazil right now is not a repeat of last year's false alarm. This is structurally different, and most of the analysis being published is missing exactly why. Let us go through it properly. Start with where we are. Brazil produces approximately 40% of the world's coffee supply. The majority of that is Arabica, the premium variety used in specialty coffee and most mainstream commercial blends. Arabica is grown in Brazil's highland states of Minas Gerais, São Paulo, and Paraná, at elevations ranging from roughly 600 to 200 meters above sea level. Arabica coffee is not a particularly cold-tolerant crop. It evolved in the Ethiopian highlands, a warm, moderate climate. Its working temperature range for healthy growth is roughly 18 to 24 degrees Celsius. It can survive brief exposures to temperatures a few degrees below zero in some conditions, but its physiological tolerance varies enormously depending on the health of the tree, the speed of temperature drop, and the specific conditions of the cold event. And right now, the conditions setting up in Brazil are the worst possible combination of all 3 of those factors simultaneously. Let us start with the atmospheric setup, because understanding what is physically happening explains why this event has the potential to be more damaging than the temperature numbers alone would suggest. A strong high-pressure system has established itself over the South Atlantic. In the southern hemisphere, high-pressure systems rotate clockwise. That clockwise rotation around this particular blocking high is directing cold, dry air from Antarctica northward through southern Argentina and Uruguay into the coffee states of southern Brazil. Here's the key word: dry. When cold air arrives at a location, the damage it does to plants depends heavily on the dew point, the temperature at which water vapor in the air condenses or freezes. In a normal frost event with moderate dew points, as temperatures fall overnight, water vapor deposits onto plant surfaces as ice, forming hoarfrost. That process of ice crystal formation releases energy, specifically the latent heat of fusion, which provides a slight but real thermal buffer to the plant tissue underneath. The ice on the outside of the leaf keeps the leaf itself slightly warmer than the surrounding air. In a dry frost, the dew point is well below the air temperature. When temperatures fall below zero, there is not enough moisture in the air to deposit hoarfrost. The plant surface stays dry. And without hoarfrost formation, without that latent heat buffer, the plant cells themselves are directly exposed to the full radiational cooling of a clear, dry night. Under clear skies with no cloud cover and no moisture, the Earth's surface and everything on it radiates heat upward into space without anything blocking or returning it. This is called radiational cooling. On a dry, clear night with no wind, surface temperatures at the canopy level of coffee trees can fall 2 to 4 degrees Celsius below what the official forecast temperature shows, because official temperatures are measured in standard instrument shelters at 1.5 meters height, not at ground level or canopy level where the coldest air pools. So when a forecast shows minus 1 degree Celsius in a coffee region under these conditions, the actual temperature experienced by the coffee flowers and buds at canopy level could be minus 3 or minus 4. And for an Arabica tree that is already physiologically stressed, minus 3 degrees does not just cause cosmetic damage. It ruptures cell walls. Ice crystals form inside the plant tissue, expanding as they freeze, physically tearing the cellular structure. Once that damage occurs, when the temperature rises again in the morning and the ice melts, the cells do not recover. They collapse. The leaf turns black. The bud dies. Now here is why this specific event is landing on a fragile system rather than a healthy one. Brazilian coffee trees have experienced a compounding series of stresses over the past 4 years. The 2021 to 2022 drought in Minas Gerais was the worst in 90 years by some measures. That drought depleted the carbohydrate reserves stored in the root systems of trees that have to draw on those reserves during dry periods. Then, heat stress events in 2024 caused significant flower abortion, meaning the trees produced fewer cherries than their canopy structure would suggest. Trees under chronic stress have a reduced cold tolerance. Research on Arabica physiology shows that well-nourished, healthy trees can sometimes tolerate brief exposures to minus 3 or even minus 4 degrees before cell damage becomes severe. Stressed, weakened trees can begin to suffer cellular damage at minus 1 to minus 2 degrees. These are not dramatic differences in temperature. They are differences of 1 or 2 degrees that completely change whether a cold event is survivable or devastating, and the timing makes all of this worse. June and July are the bud development phase for Arabica trees in Brazil. The trees are initiating the buds that will become next year's flowers. Those buds, once damaged, do not regenerate for the remainder of the season. Frost damage in June does not just reduce this year's remaining crop. It eliminates the primary reproductive structures for next year's harvest. Arabica follows a biennial bearing pattern. Trees naturally alternate between heavier and lighter crop years. When frost damage during bud development eliminates next year's primary buds, the compounding effect on production is not one season. It is 2 to 3 years of reduced output from those specific trees, depending on how severely the damage progresses. Now let us look at why this event is not the same as last year. In 2025, a cold outbreak generated significant market attention and a brief price spike. But the high-pressure blocking pattern that was supposed to deliver polar air into the coffee belt weakened before the coldest air arrived. The blocking high collapsed. The cold air mass stayed further south. Temperatures in the main coffee regions fell but stayed generally above damaging thresholds. The market gave back its gains when crop scouts confirmed limited damage. This year's setup has 2 structural differences. First, the blocking high is more robustly established, with stronger central pressure and a more northward position. The modeling shows this high maintaining its position through the critical window rather than collapsing prematurely. Second, the source region for the cold air is further south, drawing from closer to Antarctic source air masses that have had less time to warm as they transit Argentina and Uruguay. Neither of these differences guarantees a damaging event. Weather forecasting at this range and this scale of impact has genuine uncertainty. But the probability distribution of outcomes is shifted meaningfully toward a more significant event compared to 2025. Here is the specific timeline for what we are watching. Monday, June 22nd, the cold front enters southern Paraná state. Temperatures fall, but remain 4 to 6 degrees above damaging thresholds. No significant threat at this stage. Tuesday, June 23rd. The high-pressure dome locks in over the South Atlantic. Winds at the surface shift to northwesterly ahead of the coldest air, which has a drying effect on the atmosphere. Dew points begin to fall. Well, this is the setup phase. Wednesday night into Thursday morning, the first critical window. Forecast lows of -1 to -3 degrees Celsius in southern Paraná, potentially -0.5 degree to -1.5 degrees in northern Paraná. Under the dry frost conditions described above, actual canopy level temperatures could be 2 to 3 degrees below official forecast minimums. This is the first test. Thursday, June 25th. Daytime. Brief temperature recovery above freezing. Growers assess damage from the first night. Soil moisture is critical now. Dry soils release heat from the surface faster than moist soils. Thursday night into Friday morning, the second and potentially more dangerous window. The coldest air of the event is forecast to arrive during this period. Forecast lows potentially reaching -2 to -4 degrees in southern Paraná, -1 to -2 degrees in northern Paraná and southern São Paulo state. Friday morning is the window that determines whether this event is a significant market-moving crop threat. Now for the market dimension, because the physics of the frost matters most to the people growing coffee, but the financial dynamics affect everyone who buys it. Certified Arabica stocks on the ICE exchange fell to approximately 800,000 bags in late 2025, one of the lowest levels in years. This means the physical buffer between production disruptions and price spikes is thin. There's less stock available to absorb a supply shock than there was in previous years. At the same time, commodity funds collectively reduced their long positions in coffee, pulling roughly $2.5 billion out of the market between April and early June 2026. They were betting on a large 2026 to 2027 Brazilian crop. Arabica futures prices had retreated from highs near $3.40 per pound to a range of $2.60 to $2.80. This combination, low physical stocks, and a market that is net short going into a potential supply disruption, is the setup for a sharp, fast price recovery. If frost damage is confirmed, fund managers who exited their positions will face pressure to re-enter rapidly as damage reports arrive from crop scouts. That kind of forced re-entry into a thin market with low inventories can move prices quickly. The historical parallel that traders reference every time Brazil has a frost event is July 1994, when a severe frost in the coffee belt caused Arabica prices to roughly triple over the following several months. The situation today is not identical, and 1994 was an extreme event. But the structure of low stocks plus a short market plus a potential supply disruption creates the conditions for outsized price movements if damage is confirmed. For coffee growers in the affected regions, the most effective protection available is continuous overhead irrigation. Sprinkler systems running throughout the entire overnight period create a constant supply of water that freezes on the exterior of leaves and branches. As long as water is continuously freezing on the exterior, the latent heat released during that process keeps the temperature of the leaf tissue underneath at approximately 0 degrees. The ice itself becomes a protective shell. The critical operational rule is continuous. If irrigation is stopped during the night while temperatures are still below 0, the outer layer of ice stops forming and begins to stabilize. Under some conditions, this can actually trap cold air against the plant's surface in a way that worsens damage. If you start irrigating, you run it all night without interruption. For roasters and coffee importers watching this situation, the advice is straightforward. If damage is confirmed by crop scouts early next week, do not expect to buy your way out of the price spike by waiting. Low exchange stocks mean there is limited physical coffee available to buffer a supply disruption. Contracts and forward purchases made before the damage confirmation will be significantly more favorable than anything done after for consumers. If you have a favorite coffee brand or roaster, you may want to stock up on your preferred product before pricing adjustments work their way through the supply chain. Roasters typically absorb commodity price increases for some weeks or months before passing them to retail. That window, if a frost event confirms significant damage, could be 2 to 3 months, 2 nights, 23rd and 26th of June. In a stretch of farm country in Paraná and São Paulo state where coffee trees are already stressed and buds are in their most vulnerable developmental phase. The market got this wrong on the way down, pulling money out as the risk was building. The question now is whether the atmosphere delivers what the setup suggests it can, and whether the trees that have already survived drought, heat, and years of stress have enough resilience left to survive one more night below 0.